Well, thank you for putting on this video on YouTube or this MP3 on your MP3 player. I'm Gareth O'Shea John. I am the owner of counterintuition.com, and I'm joined by Alec Gourley, who is the owner and writer on fractionallyreserved.com. Alec, thank you so much for joining me again.
No problem, Gareth. Good to talk to you again.
Great, man. Well, I basically I have something big I want to talk about, but if there's anything that you want to talk about first.
No, this sounds good. This sounds good. I'm intrigued.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I was thinking. First of all, I suppose there's a couple of little caveats I need to start with. I don't like government. Okay. No, it's not just a feeling. It's not just a personal. I mean, it is a feeling, of course, but it's also there's a very logical and there's a moral stance that I have, and that is, I mean, most simply put, it's not okay for me to steal from somebody. That's a universal. I cannot steal from somebody. I can't go to my next door neighbor and take their stuff. Even if I'm starving or whatever, maybe, if somebody didn't know and I slipped a bit of bread or whatever, you might say, go on, that's no big deal. But it wouldn't be right, but it's not a big deal. But it's still a universal that it's not okay to steal from people. That's a number one kind of rule. You learn that as a kid. It's never okay when you're a kid, and that's the standard we hold kids to. So why not hold everybody to that? So as that's a principle, and as it's something that we can pretty much all universally agree to, then it's not okay for somebody else to steal from me. And so, and then of course, what I'm really referring to here is taxation. Now, I pay tax, but not because it's the right thing to do, just because if I don't, I go to prison. There are policemen who come for me, and that is a further infringement on my freedoms. So I prefer to stay out of prison and pay for that rather than not pay for it and go to prison and have everybody else in the country, of course, use their taxes to pay for me, which is, I think, highly ironic. But I don't think people go that far when they think about prison. Anyway, so that's number one. Morally, principally, it's universally wrong to steal. Therefore, government is inherently morally illegitimate because it's based on that. It's based on the principle that they can take stuff, and if you don't give it to them, they aggress upon you. Now, you don't see anybody being pulled out on the street. You don't see anybody being shot these days. But that's simply because everybody has already internalized and assumed the overhanging threat. And so we all just kind of pay it. We all pay our taxes. We all do that kind of thing. And so it's like, oh, well, because nobody's getting in trouble. No, a few people do get in trouble, and they do go to prison for many years, but mostly we don't really see that because everyone just and because it's been so many generations since, it's been a while since its inception, that we just accept it, and everybody kind of accepts it. I think even a lot of people working in government, even tax collectors, they don't see it as theft. They just see it as, okay, this is just something that we have to do. This is the one place it's okay to take money because we're doing so many good things with it. But again, nobody has ever been able to address that fundamental principle and say, well, okay, so you think it's okay for government to do it, but why? Why is it okay here and not here? And it'd be fine if somebody could give me a reason, but I haven't had a good reason yet. So, and by good, I mean logical. I mean, what about the children? What about sick people? Yeah, sure. There's emotional arguments, of course, but I could make the same argument from my standpoint. There are about 1,000,000,001 ways of actually solving problems of children's education, sick people. I mean, we can actually fix that stuff without stealing, and in fact, by stealing, you're going the other direction altogether. Anyway, okay, so I think I've set it up now somewhat. Why I would make the following statement or the following proposition, just for somebody to imagine. I think this is really useful for people if they could imagine this. Here's my question. This is the big one. What would happen if we woke up tomorrow and the government, as we know it, the politicians and the any of the system that is based on taxation, what if we woke up tomorrow morning and it was gone? What would happen next? Okay, now I want to keep this as pure as possible because we can all, I mean, obviously there'd be, there's a lot of roads we can go down with this because people are already so messed up, because people are already thinking so, along the lines of, okay, taxation is okay and all this kind of thing. But let's just imagine in the purest example, just isolated, what would happen personally? Like, just if you think of just yourself, don't think about anybody else, don't think about criminals, don't think about, just on a personal level, what would you do differently if the government was gone?
I mean, this kind of question, and what a great day it would be, but this kind of stretches to the question of how much does government influence people's personal lives. And if you think about it and say, well, look, the government doesn't affect me at all, the first thing you would definitely be, you wouldn't be paying. So, I mean, obviously you're going to be 20 to 42% better off. Number two, you would have massive deflation because obviously there would be no government around to tax the goods you're purchasing. You would end up richer. The cost of living would actually fall. The money in your pocket would be worth a hell of a lot more. The euro is not controlled from Ireland anyway. But I mean, the other point you would wake up and find is, you're right, there would be no legalized counterfeiting, legalized theft. There would be no coercive taxation. You know, I mean, you would probably end up not paying a toll on your way to work. Businesses would operate in a lot of a freer way. From a moral standpoint, stealing's wrong. So why should anybody be allowed to steal from me, let alone the government of the nation? But I mean, I would have a bigger issue with it in terms of, if we look and say, you know, well, why am I paying taxes? Well, I pay for X, Y, and Z services, okay? So let's imagine in your scenario that the government doesn't exist tomorrow, okay? And if we think about what the government provides, right? Healthcare, transport, welfare, social services, maybe light and heat as well, okay? So, I mean, let's look at it from the point of view of healthcare. So, have you relied on the government recently for healthcare?
No.
No. Okay. So, I guess you go to a private practitioner, a doctor, okay? There are a number of private hospitals already. The public hospitals seem to have an issue where the service is quite good when you're in them, but getting into the system in the first place is the problem. So I can't see that being an issue. Transport, I guess, I mean, if you drive a car to work, your diesel bill or your petrol bill would just go down. You probably won't pay a toll, or if you did, it'd be going to a private operator who improves the roads. You know, welfare, I mean, there's that kind of thorny issue. Would you find people suddenly jumping off the unemployment lines and creating businesses, you know, or jumping off their bouncy castle that should have been a safety net and back into the workplace? And then, you know, social services, would private operators do it better? I mean, I can't see an issue, actually. If anything, you know, the country would actually run more efficiently.
Okay, well, this is hilarious because I've just been sitting here. This is all stuff that I didn't even get that far. And you've just basically said the world would be like 1,000% better.
Yeah, it would be a utopia. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so right, okay, this is hilarious. Okay, because I really wasn't even going that far, and yeah, we've already established. Okay, that's incredible. So, and of course, there'd be plenty of objections. Mainly would be the whole criminal thing. We could deal with, you know, obviously roads as the common joke among our circles whenever we're talking about, you know, what do we do if there's no government? Who will make the roads? You know, that's kind of a. Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious that, you know, people would lack the creativity to understand that. And, you know, it's okay. You don't need to know. And this is to let people off the hook. You do not need to know how to build a road system in the absence of government. This is really important. In the same way, you do not need to know how to build a telecoms network or to make an iPhone or to make a laptop. The point is, you don't need to build that stuff. Somebody will figure it out. Somebody will do it. Now, of course, they use these examples as examples of what they call the free rider problem, in that, you know, only certain people will be paying for them and everybody will be benefiting. And of course, I would just say that, well, I had a shower this morning and I paid money to have a shower, and if I'm sitting next to people on a bus, they're benefiting, because if I don't have a shower, I mean, you know, that's going to be an unpleasant ride for them. And in many social environments, that's I'm benefiting people. Should I charge them money for it? Well, of course you can benefit people without charging money for it. The important thing is that you can at least cover costs and then make profit. I mean, so long as profit can be made, everybody doesn't need to pay. Anyway, so that's a completely, you know, I mean, there's been so many, I mean, better than whatever I could do. So many people have addressed this. I might refer to Walter Block. He's done a great job on talking about private roads and privatizing. He's specifically roads. He'd be the person to go to. And then from that, you'd be able to build any argument against any service that's currently provided by government. Because you know, you say, I'm not fond of government, I want to get rid of it. And they would say, well, what about education? I don't like government education. They say, But you don't like education? I'm like, no, no, I love education. That's why I don't want the government to be doing it. I mean, they cannot do it, as we know, we've seen. Anyway, so yeah, yeah, on even on a smaller, more personal level, aside from financially, where and just even socially, as you just described the scenario being all these amazing upsides, like you'd have almost twice the money if anybody listening could just imagine your take home pay at the end of the week, end of 2 weeks, end of the month, whenever you get paid, just get that number in your head. Just take a second, get that number in your head. Now just double it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what you'd have. Okay, so that's number one. Now, of course, okay, we'll get to the whole crime thing and all that later on. But just imagine that first of all, double that. Oh, and also aside from doubling that, because inflation wouldn't be an issue anymore, everything becomes more affordable. Everything. You'll be able to buy stuff even if you didn't have double, you would still be able to buy stuff. Now, anyway, okay. So aside from that, just on a very individual, personal level. For example, okay, so there's laws right now. The government has laws against drinking and driving.
Yeah.
Now, I don't drink myself, but let's just say, Alec, you on a Friday night, if you wanted to go and I don't know what your preferences are, but if you wanted to go and have a few pints, and in fact, no, you wanted to do more, you wanted to get absolutely wasted. Would you go out on a Friday night, get absolutely wasted, get into a car, and drive home?
No.
No.
Would I do that if the government didn't exist? No. I okay.
So the point is that, okay, so without the law against it, um, you wouldn't do that thing.
No, exactly. And I mean, the point is as well, I would be pretty sure that if I was using a road which was no longer public, which was a private road, that if I was, there would be some kind of contract I would enter into for using that road, which would stop me from doing that. And probably their detection rates will be better than the odd Garda checkpoint on a bank holiday weekend, you know.
Well, that's a very good point. I think that, yeah, I mean, there's been amazing work done on how insurance companies would integrate with many of these services, including the
Yeah,
roads, private roads, where they would offer financial incentives if you voluntarily, maybe you could have a breathalyzer installed in your car. I know people use this as an example of it's the police state. Well, of course it is when the government do it, but in a private scenario, if an insurance company could approach you and say, we will give you 20% discount on your next year if you voluntarily if you allow us to install this system. It won't cost you any money. We'll put it in for you, and basically if you now this is just one example of thousands that they would come up with, of course, but this is just one idea. The car would not start unless your breathalyzer you pass this breathalyzer, or you pass some kind of sobriety test within the car, and the car wouldn't start, and then you would get a discount on your insurance. And even the insurance companies would be, obviously they'd be involved then in providing taxi services, bus services for people who do want to go out and carry on in that sort of way. And that's, I mean, it's incredible how simple the stuff is once you hand it over to business. But
yeah,
the point I wanted to make was that if there's a law, just because there's a law there that says you shouldn't drink and drive, and if you do, we'll penalize you instead of incentivize it, first of all. But that's a whole other debate. So if you drink and drive, we'll put you in prison. That really doesn't stop people who want to drink and drive, because the proof is that we have the law right now and people still drink and drive.
yeah. And even though we've lowered the limits and increased, the penalties for doing so, people are doing it. I mean, the one thing about what the government are doing with road safety at the moment, particularly in Ireland, is, and I'm sure it's the same everywhere, but I mean, it's become a revenue generator more than anything else. It's not about stopping dangerous driving or people breaking the law. It's actually holding speed guns on the busiest motorway in the country, rather than, seeing other underage drivers on back roads. It's become just a revenue generator where they're all out in the last week of every month just trying to hit their targets so they can get funding again. But I think you've hit on a very good point there with the insurance. In the broader sense, what you're introducing there is a price mechanism into the market. And the problem with the government, with anything the government controls, there is no price mechanism. And I mean, when you're talking about insurance companies and their incentives for people, we're back to price, because at least the market can factor in a price there. They can put a price on something, whereas the government actually can't.
That's true. And so, yeah, so obviously, I mean, we don't have issues where people speed drunk driving on Formula One tracks, or people show up in Tesco and start shooting up heroin in between the aisles. I mean, it's just not an issue because they would see to that. That's not a place. The only place this kind of stuff happens is on public property. We don't see this kind. I mean, I'm not saying that crime doesn't happen in private property. I'm just saying that it's so minimal.
You're back to the tragedy of the commons again. If there is no private property, if I don't own it, if you don't own it, I mean, obviously things are going to happen to it because there is no self-interest, there is no incentive there for somebody to respect those property rights. Because part of it's saying, well, you coercedly took the tax from me in the first place, so I'm partly paying for this. So
Okay, so and even on a even to get smaller, more just to refine it down even more, because I want to get on such a personal level here that people can really identify with this. I don't want this to be just some where people can just look at the bigger, because this is, I mean, people don't make decisions based on the bigger pictures. They don't make decisions based on, okay, we might have an insurance company tomorrow if we do away with it. They make decisions based on, okay, how do I benefit? How can I imagine this working tomorrow if this was to happen? Would I be able to survive? And so when the opportunity comes along for people to go, you know what, let's say there was some kind of, I know it would never happen, but just hypothetically, if there was a vote, let's say, where people could say, well, should we not have government tomorrow? That people would be prepared to go, you know what, I'm going to say no and give it a try, and just let's see what happens, because so people are already prepared. So I just wanted to go through a couple of points, just at the most important things you do in your life, right? At least where you spend your time. So, it would say people in a full-time job in Ireland, anywhere between 30 hours and 50 hours, you have a full-time job. If government disappeared tomorrow, would you stop going to work?
No.
If government disappeared tomorrow, would you stop going to the cinema?
No.
Or buying groceries for yourself?
No.
Or going to the gym, buying video games, spending time with your friends, your family, like all of the things that you do in your day. Is any of it, at any point, is there anything that you could think of that you specifically do actively? Not that you don't do, but what is it that you do that you are doing because the government said this is a good idea?
No, in actual fact, you'd probably do more of it because you'd have more disposable income.
That's right. So pretty much, because I was going through this yesterday and I was thinking, literally the only single thing I can think of that I actively do is pay tax because the government is there. And so if the government wasn't there, that's the one thing that I would stop doing. It's the only action that I would actually stop doing, because I don't kill people, not because there's a government law. I don't kill people because that just sucks. Like, why would I do that? It's just a jerk move. Like, why, you don't need to kill somebody. I mean, unless somebody came threatening me with a knife or whatever, and the only option was for me to, take them out. I mean, of course, obviously, but that's not an issue. I mean, who really has that issue?
So you've got, I mean, it's a dystopian, future that we do see in the movies, etc., like that, where government breaks down and you have failed states and complete anarchy, people going through bins, mass riots, violence everywhere. From what you're saying and from what we've been talking about here, it doesn't look like that would happen.
Yeah, like I think people are at this point pretty responsible,
Look at Ireland and crap that this country has been through over the past 5 years. We don't have complete anarchy, which is a little bit of a shock to me, but we don't.
Right. So having established that, let's just say, we haven't addressed criminal activity yet, or safety nets. We can get that in a second, but no, actually, let's do that now. Let's do it. So we're just looking at criminal activity. Let's say, before we get to healthcare, what's to stop criminal activity? I don't know if you've done much research on this. I have a couple of answers. I by no means extensive. What is to stop criminal activity if you didn't have a public police service?
I mean, there's nothing to stop various private police forces, from entering into contracts with individuals that they will, monitor your private property or look after yourself. There's another interesting point which I think Murray Rothbard would have brought up a few times, which is the monarchist state, which basically means you get rid of all forms of government, but you might retain the likes of, say, a fire engine or a police force, just to stop violent crime rather than victimless crime. But essentially, I mean, I can't see a difference between the effectiveness of a public police force as it is at the moment where we are versus numerous private operators who are regulated and enter into contracts with individuals.
I'm not sure if you saw. I posted a video up on Counterintuition a few months back. It was the Detroit-based security firm who had taken an active interest in providing security in his own neighborhood. Because I'm not sure if many people are aware, but Detroit is basically broken down. They don't have people are basically creating a new civilization in Detroit right now. It's like they don't have any state government effectively. Now I don't know if anybody listening from Detroit. I know I have a couple of followers from Detroit there. Maybe you guys could comment and let me know if that's accurate or not. But this guy a few years ago he just had a dog and he had a rifle. And he would just walk around his neighborhood to provide security at the nighttime because the police wouldn't go there. So he asked for apartment building owners, to give him one apartment in each of these complexes, just for him, so he could set up some cameras, set up a little office, and he would provide security. And now he's serving 500 different businesses or something. They're all paying him, and from the money that he's getting, he's able to provide security for free to a bunch of different neighborhoods. Like he does, his firm takes care of women who have been in abusive situations. I mean, typically, I'm not saying it's just women in abusive situations, but one of the examples was that women in abusive homes, where they're going through divorce proceedings or whatever, and there's a risk of the ex-husband showing up and trying to take the kids or trying to be violent or whatever. He will assign he's now got staff. He will assign one of his staff to stay with the family, stay with the mother, with the kid, escort them to school, escort them to and from the courthouse. And they're not charging her anything. They're not charging these families anything. I mean, because they've so much money left over from providing the security services for larger corporations. And they're trusted. It's 500. There's 500 companies. I'm not sure how many staff he has, but it must be pretty significant. But and he does homes as well. And this is just one guy with a few staff, and he's able to serve all these people and do an amazing job. He's never had a situation where he showed up to solve any kind of a violent situation where there's been lethal force used. He's never killed anybody. They've never been to court for using excessive violence. And nobody has ever been killed after hiring the service, or even in an abusive situation. They have a 100% success rate, because how they approach each situation is. He even said it himself. He uses the word love, like he loves the people he's protecting, and so he's big on having all these different tools on your belt, other than just using force, other than just having the pistol ready to go. Like they have weapons in the absolute, for use in the absolute emergency. But that's it. I mean, they have all these other tools that they develop to disarm situations before they go hostile.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. It's kind of a question like, would you prefer Batman or PC Plot to show up?
This guy is Batman. He is Batman.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a private operator, doing the public good example. Actually, it'd be really good if you put that back up on Counterintuition as well.
I will. I'll put it in the link in this video on YouTube, and I'll put it on Counterintuition again. Because it's great to watch the guy. It's only 9 minutes or something like that video, and it's absolutely. Again, it nearly brought me to tears watching it. I mean, the guy was so passionate about what he does, and it was just incredible. Because if so many people want security services, and they see the obvious benefit of it, so why in the world do we need a forceful government imposing security service? If so many people know that it's required, why couldn't they just pay for it? Or even in the case of this guy, where people can't afford it, they still get the security service, and he doesn't say, "Oh, you're a free rider, you're a freeloader, you need to cough up, woman," and she's got no money, and so she doesn't get security. It's nonsense. No, he gets his reputation by providing this free service, and of course, he's allowing her to get to the place where she's going to be able to make real money and then donate to him. I mean, it's all voluntary. It's all on a voluntary basis.
But I mean, you're dead right there. I mean, the transport companies have a similar model where they're privatized. A certain bus company might get profitable routes, but they also have to serve the one that the government wouldn't serve either. And they've no problem doing that. They still make a profit, but they're serving the public good as well, which is great. But here's one to throw at you, Gareth. Now, we've discussed all of this without government, okay? So we're going on to the next bit now. What if this is the big question, and I don't necessarily have the answer for this, but you probably do. I mean, if you are really sick, or if you were born with a disability, or you have special needs, what happens if the government doesn't exist tomorrow in your scenario?
Well, what happens right now is there's a very low chance of, like, when it comes to serious illness, they make money available from their collective pot. That's not an issue. The money is available, but the cures, the health system, the all of the I mean, we don't have specialists in Ireland. First of all, we have a handful. They've all left, and the ones who were training left college because they realized that, okay, no, this is not. I mean, our college system is not correct. It doesn't teach proper medicine. I mean, it's completely stalled. The medical services in Ireland have completely stopped. They're not progressing forward, and the reason for that is the government involvement. The money is not the issue. Money is not a question. The problem is that innovation is not possible, and so. Sure, the government will say, yeah, we'll pay whatever we can to help this victim of whatever it is out. But the
Yeah.
problem is they don't have either the doctor who knows how to pull off the service, or the technology, which hasn't come into existence yet because of the existence of taxation, excessive regulation. I mean, you look at the kind of regulation around just medicine. If you want to bring a new pill to the market, a new type of medicine, you have to go through like a 10-year process. You have to, you have to get a patent first of all. But that still doesn't protect anybody. I mean, it's some Chinese company can come along and figure it out. Just put someone in the company, and in a period of 10 years, you're trying to contain a leak of a formula for some pill that you're trying to make. And then after 10 years, you have to go through all this. Well, it's within the 10 years and after you have to go through all this rigorous testing process. And of course, that's all very good. I have no problem with testing that. But the problem is that innovation is completely stalled. There's no progress because of all of the regulation that stops pills from going into the market. I mean, I saw, there's numerous cases of terminal patients being made aware of experimental treatments that may or may not work. And they say, you know what, I'm going to die in 3 days or something. I might as well try it. And the government says, no, we can't allow you to do that. It hasn't passed the test yet. And it's like, oh, well, okay, but I would like to try it. I don't care. You don't have to make it available for everybody. I'm making an informed decision because I'm going to die in a few days. Like, I will pay. I'll pay anything. I'll pay every penny in my bank account for this. And no, sorry, you can't do that. So, sorry, you have to die. But in a free market, or in a at least with a free market in medicine, and of course in a free market with charity, we have cases, again, so many people out there who can readily identify with falling on hard times, particularly because of medical conditions that you cannot predict. It's one of the few things, like if you say, yeah, the guy kept shooting himself up with heroin or whatever, you might not be as sorry for him because that was a decision he made. Now, people are still sympathetic towards that, but it is really it's a bigger deal when it's somebody who suddenly contracts a disease that they had no control over, like a cancer or whatever, something that just crops up and they weren't able to plan for. If they were born with it or whatever, obviously they weren't able to plan for it. But you have so many people around the world who are interested in this stuff, and who have spare capital and would have, as we discussed already, would have at least double spare capital available in the absence of taxation, that they would be able to bring this money forward, put it towards research, put it towards even just paying for the family to get through a difficult time, paying for transportation, this is stuff that is provided in the free market by people who, I mean, what does Bill Gates do? What does Richard Branson do when these people have money? I mean, they say, okay, I have more money than I can ever hope to spend in my entire life. What am I going to do now to make the most of it? And they invest this money. They spend it openly. They throw it at charity organizations who are doing good things. That's what we do when we have more money than we can spend on ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're dead right there. I think there is a fear when you start talking about, no government, well, who'll provide this for these people. I think we've a lack of faith in ourselves being in any way altruistic, in any way willing to help people that are less fortunate than ourselves because of, well, that's the government's job. Well, we have to get back in the mind frame, well, that's actually our job. I think that would make for a better planet as well,
That's absolutely right. So that's okay. So that's healthcare and crime. Is there anything we've missed in this? I mean, those are the pretty big ones.
No, I mean, I was just thinking about it there. I guess it's the recent events of Margaret Thatcher's passing, and when she was privatising industries. I mean, people in Britain in the 70s had to put up with, no electricity for 4 days a week. Black bin bags, a mention of them just covering their streets and stuff like that, and various other disruptions. I mean, they didn't miss, those government-owned industries going out of action at all. Like, they were delighted that, these kind of things can be privatized. I mean, people obviously thought it was the end of the world, but then things that free market came in, picked it up, and took it over.
That's right, and that's the thing too. I mean, we really don't have to have the answers to the specifics in this, and this, people need to be a bit more reassured about this. The issue is not how do we solve specific issues. It would be like asking 100 years ago, how are we going to solve the problem of we're running out of domain names on the internet? And 100 years ago, what would they have said? Well, okay, explain to me what the internet is, and you explain it to them, and they would say, well, I don't know, maybe you could come up with an extra character or something. I mean, they could hypothesize and come up with some good ideas, but that's really not the point. I mean, the market is where everybody gives a go. They're like, okay, I have this idea. I'm going to give it a try. Let's see if it works. And we know it works because people pay for it. We know it doesn't work when they don't pay for it. And that's the problem with government. We don't have the choice. We can't say, oh, that doesn't work, so we're not going to pay for it. We have to pay for it anyway. And so the government are flying blind. It's not like it's their fault. I mean, it's their fault for stealing the money, but it's absolutely not their fault for not knowing what to do with it, because we can't say, oh, that's a bad idea, that's a good idea. We can basically just vote every 4 years or whatever it is, or whenever they decide to offer us a referendum. And even then they just look at it and go, okay, well, that's interesting. So what do we do now? And of course they still don't know, because they're not entrepreneurs. They're not people who are, obviously they're not entrepreneurs, or they would be doing that instead of stealing money from people and sitting behind a desk. But we don't need to know. I remember I saw a quote. It was some guy, I don't remember who it was, but it was he was making a statement about public transport. Someone had predicted that at the time. This must have been, I don't know. It was probably this or last century, but it wasn't that long ago. Maybe in the no, it was 18 something, and they said cars were just being invented, but were not mainstream. And this guy, I think he'd heard about it, but he said, yeah, it's a nice idea, but how could that work mainstream? And so the guy asked him, I think we're going to have, the way things are going, I think we're going to have public transport, or not public transport, we're going to have every single person on Earth we're going this trend. They're going to be able to travel wherever they want, and they're going to have their own means of transportation. No, of course we're not there yet, but we, in Ireland, anybody can get a car pretty much. America, Europe, anybody can get a car. And so, but the guy's response was, there is absolutely no way we're going to be able to, everyone's going to be able to have their own means of transport, because who's going to shovel up the dung on the road from the horses?
Exactly, and that was the biggest environmental threat at the late 19th century. There was actually numerous investigations done, particularly in New York, because it was causing all sorts of health issues. You're right. But I mean, the people should have been thinking of cars rather than a faster horse. But just on your point there, I mean, one more thing there, just that I thought of saying. I mean, we live in an age now where the Republicans in the US, or we even have Fine Gael doing it here, where they seem to propose limited government, as the solution to the problem of the government. That in some way, less government would be better. And yes, it would, but we've the situation in this country here where we're talking about the abolition of the Senate, or the English translation, the Senate, whereas if we won't have an upper house, we'll just have a lower house. As in this way, that this form of limited government is actually better. It's actually giving the government more control, if anything. So anything that comes under the sphere of actually limited government, less government, will kind of be doing away with the government, is actually, cloaking the fact that they just want to centralize power even more. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I have a major issue with getting rid of an upper house of parliament.
That's hilarious. Well, that's actually, I've noticed that with the Republicans in America too, like you were referencing, they do talk about limited government, but they pretty much engage in the same kind of thing. When they talk about deregulation, a lot of the time it's they want to get rid of regulation that is regulation on other regulation. It's regulation that's like a top end on, like, it wasn't the Republicans in this case, it was the Democrats, and Timothy Geithner, the Treasury Secretary, he was you're talking about the debt ceiling, was it last year? If we don't raise the debt ceiling, then we're not going to be able to pay our debt, which is basically just admitting you have a pyramid scheme. It's absolutely hilarious. At least, 10 years ago, people wouldn't have been that dishonest or that honest, excuse me. It was so honest. It was like, we're basically just telling you, if we don't borrow more money, we can't pay for the money we borrowed. I mean, how is that not the definition of a pyramid scheme? But yeah, so, so the Democrats just openly say we need more government, whereas Republicans are a bit more sneaky. They say, no, we need smaller government, so let's get rid of this, this, and this. And of course, this and this is the top limit on the other regulation, that now they can borrow more money, or now they can do this, now they can do that. It's just like what happened here with the Seanad. Getting rid of the Seanad is getting rid of a limiting factor. I mean, I don't know how effective it was at limiting anyway, but at least it was some kind of limit. I mean, we're talking about. I think was the objection that it was their wages. We're not talking about big money.
They'd save the country, 20 million, which, as we all know, is going to make a huge dent in that bank. That is.
And I was going to make the point as well about just on those same lines about not being able to perceive the future and not having to, not needing to worry. Like, the idea is that we're supposed to put morality first. I think it's a good idea to do that. It's a practical idea. It's a good idea to put morality first and worry about the consequences later. In the same way that we had slavery. Now, obviously we didn't have slavery, but among the abolitionists in Britain and in America back 100 and whenever years ago, 200 years ago, there was talk about a very small minority of people said we need to do away with slavery, and then pretty much everyone else said, yeah, but who's going to pick the cotton? Who's going to do, and it was true. Their economy was based on slavery, like at least a large part of it was based on slavery. And so people who had the capital to invest were the slave owners. These were the people who had capital. And these are this is the ironic thing, okay? And this is really crazy, because I was just thinking about this yesterday. Even going back as far, I could go back as far as Greece with this. This might be stretching it a bit, but if you go back as far as Greece, they also had slavery 2,000 years ago. I don't know if you knew this, but they invented the steam engine in Greece. They had a steam engine in Greece.
What?
They actually had a steam engine in Greece. And you know what they did with it, okay? So did they build trains? Did they build machinery that could do the work of, 1,000 people in one factory? No, they made toys out of these steam engines. They made toys for kids. And the reason they didn't make this, and this is a huge jump here, but I'm not sure is it so huge. But it's certainly not a huge jump in just recent history. But it's possible, it's at least conceivable, that the Industrial Revolution could have happened in Greece thousands of years ago had slavery been abolished. And here's why. If all the people who had the capital to invest in innovation and in machinery owned slaves, and so they're getting their money from slaves, from selling slaves, from owning slaves. If you're to create machinery that can now do the work of slaves, the value of the slaves disappears. So at least it diminishes to eventually being nothing. So this is what I was thinking. I was thinking, okay, so if all the people who had the capital to invest in innovation, in machinery, in what they had, which was a steam engine, I mean, they had the ability to make a steam engine,
right.
Then they didn't want to use that for the purposes of industry, because that's where the slaves, so many people depended on the slaves and the value of the slaves to do so. And so it was the same just recently. You imagine how different things would have been if slavery was just if it never came into being, and you had to rely on innovation. You couldn't rely on using force. You couldn't rely on appropriating, because effectively what a slave was somebody who did all the labor and you got all of their product. Whereas today we have a similar thing. We do all the labor and they get half, but it's just a scale then, So imagine there was no taxation. Imagine the kind of stuff that we could have now if industry, like so many larger businesses, depend on subsidies right now. They depend on regulation. They depend on the same kind of drive that was behind slavery, which is force. You forcibly appropriate from others their time, their labor, and if that wasn't there, then Well, imagine what we could have. And of course, you have all these incentives for businesses not to want to innovate for that reason, because they have subsidies, because they get regulation. If the government disappeared, they would lose their subsidies, they would lose their regulation. And so businesses are not interested in doing away with slavery. See, so that's how I made that comment.
Exactly. I mean, you're dead right. Obviously, without that, I mean, without taxation, the capital base would rise. You know, the investment pool would be larger. Returns would obviously be better as well. But I mean, that point, I think, leads us onto something we might have just left out of this government gone tomorrow debate. If we think of modern day slavery, I mean, what are, you know, the hundreds of thousands of public servants and civil servants going to do if the government doesn't exist tomorrow?
That's a fine point. What are they going to do? Well, first of all, what do they have now? They have time. Do they have
Yeah.
skill? Probably not. A lot of them are unskilled labor. I mean, you're talking about. And I'm not talking about everybody. A lot
Yeah.
of people just end up in those services because the jobs have evaporated that they wanted. They wanted to do something else. Now, I did. I mean, I did speak to somebody before. I remember I was expecting this really deep philosophical thing. It was the end of the evening, and I said, "Man, if you could work at anything you wanted in your life, what would it be?" And this guy said, "Oh, I just want to be a public. I want to work for the council. I want to work 9 to 5, secure job." And that's it. I'm like, you're kidding me? Like anything in the world. So that scarcity isn't an issue. You could do whatever. What is the thing you want? And he said, yeah, no, that's what I want. I'm like, okay, all right. So that guy's in trouble in a free market. Okay. Okay, now what he could do is he could certainly find a secure job doing some kind of pencil pushing or something like that, or sweeping floors. There's nothing wrong with sweeping floors, cleaning windows, kind of the lower skilled labor that you can pick up. I mean, this guy would be cut out for.
You know what the best thing about the government going away is? There'd be no minimum wage. So therefore, those people get back their USP. They get back their thing that makes them unique, which is that they're willing to do their job for cheaper than anybody else.
That's a very good. Yeah, it's true. That's true. No, people have a real problem with going less than minimum wage because they think that that's like a subhuman living. If you go less than minimum wage, what kind of a living is that? But of course, the truth is that it's not about that. It's about what can you produce for a company, and then like half that, so or more, because you want to be making money for your boss. Otherwise, why is he going to have you hanging around? Why is he going to want to take care of you? But there's always an incentive to get better, to provide more for your business. You start off by making £3 an hour. You could end up making 100 or 1,000 euros just by being in the environment where your boss is giving you this opportunity to interact with customers. He's taking all the risk. You like, if the company falls, you don't have to pay anything. He's paying you whether the customers come in or not. I mean, no matter what, this is, it's always going to be a good deal to work for somebody else. A much better deal than working for yourself, because when you're working for yourself, like I am, it's tough. It's tough stuff. Now I've had various jobs, tough jobs. I've been a waiter. I've been I've worked in a kitchen. I've done cleaning windows, cleaning tables, and I have to say, I really don't see. I see benefits in both that are almost equal. I'm just, I could see why somebody would logically want to just stay sweeping floors for the rest of their life versus doing something like, running a stock exchange business or something like that. It's just a personal preference thing. And if you're not happy with the money you're getting, then provide more service. Figure out something. We're all entrepreneurs. Every single individual is an entrepreneur.
Innovative. Yeah, exactly.
In the absence of government, of course, without the safety net, as they call it, well, imagine the amount of capital that would be floating around without government being, arbitrarily spending money on stuff, paying in many cases 1,000, 2,000% more than they should be on toilet seat covers and carpet for some government building somewhere, when you could have all that property, all that money freed up for incredible. And here's another thing too. I think we're at a point here in Ireland. Like, a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of younger people who are transitioning from leaving cert into college, and you ask them, or even in junior cert, you ask them, what do you want to do? You have any idea what you want to do? No, the vast majority, some of them know straight away, but the vast majority of them don't know what they want to do. Yeah. And adults and their parents and their teachers see this as like this horrible, this bad thing that, well, these kids don't have any direction. They need career guidance. They need somebody to sit down and do some, multiple choice tests with them to figure out what they're best suited for. But that's complete garbage. The reason that they don't know what to do is because first of all, they haven't been exposed to the market. They don't know what people need. That's number one. They don't know how they can be useful. They don't know how to take what they have and turn it into something for somebody else. That's the whole point of a job. That's what a job is. And so they've been locked up in these schools for so long, they don't know. But there's a positive side to it in that you actually don't need to. Like, a lot of people are going into studying programming. I know somebody who studied. They have a master's in aeronautical engineering, and they're working a part-time job in some shop down the road here. They can't get a job in aeronautical engineering because they didn't anticipate what the market would be like ahead of time. Some career guidance person just said, "Oh, it's really cool. You should be an aeronautical engineer." And they go, "Oh, wow, yeah, I'll work really hard and get loads of money." And this is so sad. But in actuality, if you don't bank on that, if you bank on, let's just say, "Oh, you know what, I'll do whatever." Right now, with the internet being what it is, you have third world countries. You have not so much all third world, but some developing economies, Vietnam, some parts of Philippines, parts of China. You've all these lower wage areas in the world where, like we'll say, there's a bunch of places in India. I've dealt with I've hired some staff in India to compile code for some work that I do, and their average wage is about $9 a week. It's something very, very minimal. And what you have now is a case where you can have a 14-year-old kid come up with an idea for a business and work a part-time job in McDonald's, on the weekends or whatever, or in their spare time. They can do some work in McDonald's. They can wipe windows. They can clean floors. They can take that capital, and for a couple of €100, they can start a business using people in the third world, developing the countries, in taking advantage of the low cost of living in India, in China, and they can actually hire people at the age of we're talking about 12-year-old kids could be running software companies with part-time money that they make from McDonald's, and making millions of euros within a couple of years by the time they're even 18. I mean, who cares about college? Why you want to study programming when you have 1,000 people in some small village in China who have spent all their time learning this stuff, and now you can hire them for money you make from selling burgers? I mean, come on, like.
I mean, if you think about it, yeah, why become a programmer yourself, and you can just hire one halfway across the world who already knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and why graduate college with a massive debt and you're only just up to speed with it? No, I'm not saying that they're world-class programmers. I'm not saying, like, we do come up with a lot better stuff over here in terms of innovating. And then they take it over there and they basically copy it. They're brilliant at that. It's wonderful. But that's the level that younger kids would be at, 12, 13, and they can come up with, even just simple models. I've been advising some younger people. Probably parents would probably kill me, but I've been advising some younger people to look at app development, software development, and don't learn programming. Just learn about how to build a concept. Look at games on the marketplace. Look at how they're doing, or apps on the marketplace. The most successful ones, copy them. And look at adding something new. Just think of one new element, add it in, write it down on a piece of paper, take a picture with your phone, and email it on a website like Freelancer or Guru or peopleperhour.com. There's tons of these websites. And you have like 20 bids within an hour or two of people who are just like, yeah, I'll do that for $20. I'll make that for $20. No problem. It's incredible, man. I mean, and of course, this is the problem. This is why you have things like minimum wage and child labor laws and school and college. A lot of these unions cannot increase the amount of money a business makes. It can only limit membership in the business. And so if there's less people, then there's more money to go around. So by keeping kids in school, this was a big push by the union. I'm not saying it was only the unions, but the unions and agencies who want to take credit for increasing wages, mostly government agencies, they encourage kids to stay in school, to go to college, in order specifically just to keep them out of the jobs market, so that there's more money for the older people.
The workforce and their terms and conditions, you're dead right. That's what unions have always done. Crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts, man. And I just, if there are any younger people listening, anybody under the age of 16 or whatever, pretty much, okay, adults, do not have it figured out. Don't trust them. They're all lying to you.
And if they tell you they are figured out, yes, they're definitely lying to you.
Yeah, I mean they have money, they have stuff figured out. They have, they know how to get on. They have the upper hand because they own the house, they own the money, they own this stuff. But they're just really good at pretending how to get on in society. They have no idea how any of it works, and they're lying to you when they want to encourage you to do this, that, and the other. Now, I'm not saying all of them. Obviously respect your parents, that kind of thing. But just take everything that adults tell you with a pinch of salt. They're very, very good at lying. So just watch that.
The wise age-old advice, go and get a good safe job in the bank.
Alec, we could be in trouble for this one. Okay, just disclaimer for the very end. Pay your taxes, not necessarily because it's moral, but just because it'll keep you out of prison. But if an opportunity comes non-violently to do away with violence and aggression, then be prepared for that. That's something that people should get ready for. In the same way that people got ready for the abolition of slavery. I'm thinking that we should, now would be a good time to get ready for. Let's start looking at non-violent options, getting rid of stuff like taxation and non-violent. Just clarify. You got any final thoughts? Any closing remarks?
No, I think I'm going to fight the power.
I think I probably did more talking than anybody in the world, but I like that.
That's great fun, actually. No, that's brilliant. That's thanks, Gareth. That was great.
Thanks for your time, man. See you later.
Take care. Bye.